11:03 here, so I'm going to go ahead and get things kicked off. But first, before we jump right into the webinar and start talking about Concord and SSO and everything, I wanted to just drop a quick question just for everyone to kind of get the conversation started and see how people are doing today. And that question I wanted to say today or ask today is, where is your favorite place to vacation? Where is there one place in the world you love to go when you're on holiday, on vacation, just a place that helps you relax and get away from it all? Feel free to drop something in the chat. It should be open for everybody as we go through the webinar. So if you're willing, feel free to let me know if there's somewhere particular that you like to visit or you visit often when it comes to your vacations. And we'll give about 30, 60 seconds in case anyone wants to let us know. South Africa, that's an interesting one. I've heard a lot of really great things about it. Haven't necessarily been myself, but have heard a lot of interesting things just about the history and the culture there. Vegas, always a good one. Just I'd say the height of American excess in both good and bad ways, but always a lot of great things to see there. Taken a lot of trips there myself. Really do like it. Just a really, really unique city in a very American sense, I would say. All right, and if anyone wants to answer the question while we get going with the webinar, feel free to do that too. Really just like talking about these kind of things, and I think it helps to stir the conversation and helps us get to know each other. And in case anyone was unclear, I think we're going to get a bit more of an intimate crowd on the webinar today, just because SSO I think is not necessarily a niche subject, but one that is probably only important, or not only important, but most used by a smaller subgroup of people who are just Concord users or just software companies in general. But happy to jump in and kind of explain what it is for anyone who isn't clear and kind of just talk about the benefits of using it when it comes to Concord. So for SSO, I guess we should start with, what is SSO? And SSO stands for single sign-on. It's basically a master system that you can integrate into your tech stack at your company. And it makes it so that when any of your employees need to access software that the company uses of various kinds, they can just log into that master login system, that SSO, really quickly and have access to all of those platforms and apps and software at once. So they don't need to log into each one individually. They can just log into that first initial one and they're connected to everything and can jump into whatever they need. And Concord has an integration that allows it to sync up with any SSO system you would like it to. There's a few out-of-the-box integrations with some of the more common ones like Okta and Google, which we're going to kind of talk through. But it can really join with any kind of SSO system you have, whether it's a smaller one or one you've even built in your own company. It can integrate with any of them just to make that access easy. And just kind of a quick introduction just as far as Concord. So as everybody knows, Concord is just a system to unlock your contract data across the whole organization. It's a repository, e-signature, contract management lifecycle tool to support your contract management from end to end, through renewal and through every aspect of that. And in that, just in making it easy, SSO kind of helps with that process, just in giving people really quick and easy access to the tool and to the contracts that you would have inside of it, right? And as part of moving into the future, one of the things that we are really pushing on is the concept of agreement intelligence, which you may have heard of. We recently released an AI feature, which has been accessible with some of the newer plans we've released. And it's just going to unlock a lot of those insights and make things easier for people to pull data and information and extract data and information from their contracts, both on right now, the single contract scale, but eventually up to the bulk scale is what we're kind of looking at. But jumping into SSO specifically. So what are some of the benefits of SSO? And I am going to jump into a demo really quick to just kind of show it off a little bit. But I think the fun and interesting thing about SSO is that it's more defined by what it removes rather than what it really adds, right? And by the way, feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat while we're going. I'm happy to answer any questions that do come up. Would love to make this a dialogue if people do have questions about it as we go through just kind of the subject of today. But as I mentioned, it's more defined by what it removes than what it includes. And what it removes is just the lengthy sign-in process that might be included in whatever platforms or apps you have in your system, right? Or in your company and that people would use on a day-to-day basis. And so using an SSO system, there's a number of different benefits that are pretty obvious and easy, right? That we can kind of walk through just listed here. You can access the platform, any kind of software platform your company uses with just a few easy clicks. And I'm going to show that in a second by showing you exactly how easy it is to use an SSO. It allows for, that rapid login across all of your major business platforms. As I mentioned before, you just log into an SSO and everything's connected into it. So you can jump right into whatever tool you need to right away. You can maintain security of your entire tech stack that way through your IT department, because they can, they're typically the ones who would be controlling your SSO and would be setting it up for you. And that gives them security control over all of your systems because they are controlling that master login that connects everything. It makes it easy to do that and to maintain a high levels of security, including the ability to implement two-factor authentication on all logins. So we'll talk about that a little bit more once we get into the subject of SSO and I show it a little bit more. But two-factor authentication, something you may have heard of or know of. It just makes it so that rather than just putting in your username and password credentials when you log into a system, the system will send a code either to your email or to your or through your phone via text message, or even into an authenticator app in order to add an extra layer of security so that the system just really makes sure it's you before you jump in. And it makes all that easy, as well as adding and removing new users, because you can add a new user right into the SSO or remove them if they leave the company, and you can have them removed from all of the apps and systems in that way. And that's something that we're going to talk about really carefully when it comes to Concord, just because, it is a system where we do make it easy to add and remove users and seats at any time. But again, users and seats do cost money, and you can easily incur some costs you weren't planning if you throw people or seats in there that you weren't necessarily intending to. And there are some things you want to be careful with when you're setting up an SSO to try to prevent that. And I'll make sure we talk about those as well. But we can just kind of jump right into it. I know there's a lot of lead in here, but as I mentioned, there's not a ton to show as far as SSO. Let me go ahead and jump into jump into my Concord really quick so you can kind of see what it's like. So I'm logged in here to my demo account, my little demo company, but I'm going to sign out really quick and I'm going to show you what this looks like. Okay. So this is the login page you would see whenever you're jumping into Concord, right? But with the SSO system, all I need to do, I can either click one of these options here if I happen to have a single sign-on system plugged in that is, one of the ones that I listed before, like Okta or OneLogin. We happen to use Google as a company for our email domain management and our email management and everything, which has their own kind of SSO system built in. And with that, I can literally just click this and it asks which account I want to use. I'm going to use my Concord account because it's my corporate one. And I am immediately pulled into my demo site. It's really as simple as that. It takes a couple seconds to load everything, but that's really all you need to do when you have an SSO system set up. And it would be the same process for all of your different apps. It just makes it really straightforward and easy. One thing I will note is that SSO is part of the enterprise tier of Concord subscriptions. So if you're unsure if you have an enterprise subscription or if it's, and it's included in what you already have, or maybe you're thinking about an enterprise subscription and you're curious about what other things might be included in it, feel free to reach out to your CSM to ask any kind of questions, or me, if I happen to be your CSM. I'm going to be the customer success manager for probably quite a few of you here. So let me know if there is any interest. But I guess a bigger question would be, okay, it makes it really easy, right? It's super straightforward to kind of jump into a platform when you have SSO. How do you set up SSO? And even that's not as hard as you might think. Let's go ahead and jump into the integrations area of Concord just to kind of show you what that process would look like. It would really start here. So we have a number of integrations that are kind of built in and bespoke right into our platform, right? And if you kind of scroll down the list here when you're in the integrations area, you will see the SSO area. So these are some of the more common ones that people will use: ADFS, Azure, Okta, OneLogin. You may have heard those names before. But you can also just use the other SSO system right here if you have, like I said, a different one, like one that you built yourself at your company, or a smaller one that just isn't as well known as some of these. We can still use those super easy and straightforward. You can even use Facebook and LinkedIn if you really wanted to. That's not necessarily something I might like to do personally just because of my relationship with social media, but it can be a great tool if it is something you want to integrate with the rest of how you happen to work at your corporate place. And so you see there's a couple different options here. And the question is, okay, how do we go about actually going forward with this? So say I wanted to set up Okta. Well, if you click the button here for help documentation, it's going to take you into our Concord Help Center. And while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and take a moment to actually go ahead and share this link, just because if you haven't ever utilized our Concord Help Center, this is a really great resource just to show you all of the different ways or all of the different features in Concord and how to use them. So I'm going to drop that right there just in case anyone doesn't happen to have that link already. But if you want to go ahead and get started with SSO, all you really need to do is, let me go back to where I was looking. And I'm going to go to the more general SSO page because we have a few of them. And so this is typically what you would see if you want to go to the Help Center and you're looking for the SSO documentation. You would go right here. So here we list a couple of the different options that you can use for single sign-on, and I can click on any of these and it'll take me to a detailed list of instructions for how to set that up that are tailored to that particular platform. Each SSO system is slightly different in the ways that you utilize it to set up. It's fairly straightforward from my experience to add a new platform or app onto an SSO system if you already have one set up at your organization. You just need to go through a couple of steps here, send us a file of XML metadata from the SSO login system, which you can pull once you've set up an app in that system and plugged it in, and then we can do the rest on our backend side. But the links are all right here for you to access. And if there's another system that you want to use, but it isn't listed here, like I said, like a smaller one or one that you've built yourself, feel free to reach out to us, support@concord.app, and we can kind of walk you through the process as well to make sure that that's set up all super easy and accordingly. But that's all you really need to do, or all your IT team needs to do, if you happen to have an SSO system ready to go. And if you happen to use a lot of different apps at your organization, a lot of different platforms, a lot of different software, as a lot of us do today, I highly recommend getting some form of SSO system just to allow for that security and just to make things easy. And it's obviously something that we use and something that I've used at most of my organizations and just really love the ease of. While we are here, before I jump into the final segment where we're going to talk about two-factor authentication, which is that extra security layer we can add, I'm going to go ahead and make just a couple notes to be aware of when it comes to SSO and Concord specifically. So usually when people set up an SSO system, the default is that all users at an organization are given some kind of access code or key, or are given some kind of user access to all of the platforms that are in that SSO system. So all users have access to all platforms, or when you're setting up a platform, all the users would be given access to it. You got to be really careful with that when it comes to Concord, just because, like I said, if someone uses SSO to wander into the Concord system, because if you just set it up with the base default features on an SSO, they would technically be credentialed or have a license apportioned to them, or not apportioned to them. They'd have a user apportioned to them. But if they log in and that's someone who hasn't been there before, and you don't have an open and empty seat in your Concord for a new user to join with, it's going to add a paid seat. So you really want to be careful with that. There are a couple things we recommend just to make sure you avoid people wandering into the Concord system who shouldn't have access and create paid seats on accident, because it's something I see somewhat commonly. Two things you can do. First off, the most important one, I would set it so that your default role in your Concord system is viewer. So if you happen to make somebody without really setting up a team that they're on or a role that they have assigned in the system, you just throw them in really quick, their default will be viewer, so that they won't have access to any of the things in the system. They won't have any access to the features or anything. But most importantly, viewers are free seats. They can have as many viewers as you want in the system, since all they can really do is look at documents and or export them if they need to. But I recommend doing that just in case anyone happens to wander in. The second thing you can do is work with your IT team to limit access to the Concord system, which is something you would set up in the SSO itself. They have a number of different features for controlling access as far as who is on your actual SSO user list compared to who is allowed to access Concord itself. Like I said, it's usually easiest when you're setting up an SSO to just give full access to whatever kind of platforms you happen to have at the company. But that can be, not the best thing to do here, just because you can accidentally end up, getting hit with prorated invoices. And in order to do that, actually, while I'm here, let me show you really quick. You can do that as an admin at any time. If you just click into the settings area, you click into roles, and let me get the zoom out of my way so I can see this here. Okay, so I have a few different roles here. You see that viewer is set as my default role, but if I wanted to change that, all I really needed to do is click this little box next to the listing and set as default. So I can move that back and forth between those two. That way, in case there's any kind of issue or people accidentally use your SSO to get into your Concord, they will kind of find themselves up against a brick wall. They won't have access to any folders or files or anything, and they won't have access to features, and you won't get costs incurred. So something I'd like to highly, highly recommend for everyone. And now, just as far as kind of closing things out, I want to talk just a couple minutes real quick about the benefits of what's called two-factor authentication, as I kind of mentioned earlier. Concord does have a two-factor authentication system built in, but there are a couple limitations as to it right now. There are some changes I think that may be coming to it in the future. I'm not totally sure on that. But as of right now, it's something that you would have to have a user set up for themselves. So as a user, you can turn on two-factor authentication for yourself if you want to add that layer of security by going directly to the personal details tab in the settings area. So you can see here, I can't turn this on directly because I have my SSO enabled, but if I didn't have that Google SSO, I would see an option here to be able to turn it on. You can, however, if you're an admin, you can enforce it as part of the signing process. If you go to the preference area of settings, you'll see there's a couple here that require double authentication for users or double authentication for external guests. That's something you can do. But with the Concord SSO or just SSO systems in general, typically they will allow you to enforce two-factor authentication from the top down as opposed to the bottom up. So you can set that two-factor authentication and enforce it for all of your users from that top down and make it so that everybody has to use two-factor authentication as opposed to just something that people turn on for themselves. And a lot of the organizations I work with, some of them are very, very firm on security, and that just makes it easier to maintain on top of the SSO system. So really briefly, we can go ahead and just talk about some of the benefits of 2FA, right? So first off, you can control this at the SSO level, just making it easier, as opposed to on the individual platform level, which other platforms might have 2FA that you can enforce from the top down, but you would have to set it up for each one, right? You can just do it right from the SSO in here and in most SSO systems. And as I noted before, it allows for enforcement on all of those accounts from that top down, as opposed to the bottom up in a way where they would have to turn it on for themselves. Just making that really easy. It adds an additional layer of personalized security on all of your accounts just in that way. Like I said, if someone has a double authentication or two-factor authentication set up on their system, you type in your username, you type in your password, you hit enter, and it says, okay, we're going to send a code to either your email or to your phone via text and you're going to have to access that code and give it back to us in order to make sure that you are who you say you are. One other thing that's become really popular and really common as well, and that we use as well sometimes for our SSO, and that I've seen people use, is there are a lot of authenticator apps for mobile that you can use by just downloading onto your phone. When you set up a user in Concord, or they set themselves up as a user and they're going through the process of setting up their password and things, you can take a screenshot of a QR code and it will create a new listing in that authenticator that says, okay, here's a special code that is changing every 30 seconds or so when you try to log in to your system. For the two-factor aspect, rather than getting an email or a text message, it's going to say, okay, give whatever code is active, and you can pull up that app on your phone and see the active code and see how long you have before it resets. As long as you kind of put it in that 30-second window, you're good to go. Makes the whole process really easy. I'm a big fan of that as well. And so that's kind of the gist of it. It's like I said, it's defined more by what it can take away in terms of just like there's not a lot to show because it just makes the process of logging in super fast and super easy. There is some work that needs to be done on the side of your IT team typically to set up a system like SSO, but if you have one, setting up Concord in it is super easy. And with that, I know I'm going to leave the floor open for any kind of questions that might have come up just as far as setting up SSO or as far as using it in case anybody has any. And we'll just give it a couple minutes in case anybody has anything they want to kind of chime in with, and or like I said, questions they want answered about it, and we'll give the floor to them. So feel free to drop something in the chat or in the Q&A area of the webinar. You missed the recommendation on default roles. Yeah, no worries. I can easily go forward with that again. So as I said, in Concord, default roles make it really easy to make it so that when someone joins the system, if you haven't assigned a role to them, they are given a specific role by default. And the reason I brought that up in the SSO instance, in case you missed that as well, is just because if someone happens to wander into your system using SSO because you haven't restricted who can use SSO to get into Concord, they might actually get in with a paid seat if the default role is something like creator. But setting your default role to viewer in Concord is as easy as going to the roles tab in your settings area, choosing the viewer role, and then choosing set as default. You can see it's already set as default for mine just to kind of show you, but you can also set other ones as default if you want to for other purposes. For SSO, as I mentioned, we highly recommend using viewer, but it's up to you in terms of how you want to do it. So I hope that kind of answers your question and just shows how easy it is. And any other questions people have, happen to, feel free to kind of throw on in here. Yeah, you're welcome, Bobby. Okay. And it sounds like that was going to be it for the questions and things. That's fair. SSO, like I said, pretty minimal, pretty straightforward in terms of what it can offer and everything. But if you do have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us at support@concord.app. Or if you aren't sure if you have an enterprise tier and have access to SSO because you need enterprise to get access, or you're thinking that enterprise might be something for you, but you want to know more about some of the other benefits it brings